If you ever get into development and capital raising, you have to be an internal op because everyone is going to pepper you with questions about eternal doom and gloom.
Yo, what is up, everybody? I am Matt Drouin. I'm the host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Podcast, the show to listen to if you are a tired residential investor looking to scale up and do larger commercial deals. I have a special guest that I'm psyched out of my mind to have on today, Mr. Gaurang Gala of Gala Investments, based out of Cary, North Carolina. Got $40 million of assets under management. Also hosted the New American Media podcast. I'm going to let Garang tell his story and stop talking right now, but welcome on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt, for having me on. Really appreciate it. Excited to be on the pod. Like we all say, go big or go home, right? So I love the name of the podcast. Super cool. Let's talk a little bit about my journey, how my parents came to America in 1989. Through what's called family migration, right? My grandfather came in 1980 because his sister married a nuclear engineer in 1977 in California as we were building out our nuclear power plants all across the United States, and we needed skilled labor. So my grandfather came in 1980, got his citizenship in 85, and filed paperwork for us to come in 1989. I was 5 years old, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, took ESL, English as a second language, for 2 years. Really learned English watching TV, right? As most kids. 90s kid. So all of the tropes, you guys, MTV, TRL, Carson Daly, all of that. BET, 106 in Park, grew up in the culture, went to what's called governor's school here in North Carolina because we had about 4 decades of governors here really in the South that valued education, and our public school system, public university system, and community college system is second to only the UC system in California in the whole United States. And went to the School of Science and Math, then undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill, go Heels. And after that, had an opportunity to go work in investment banking, finance at Wachovia at the time. This is pre-2008 collapse. But my dad came to me and said, hey, why don't you come and join the family business? I'll pay you what those bankers are paying you. And back then it was only like $55K a year. Today, a junior financial analyst coming out, going to work at JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, B of A, wherever, is making about $120, right? And he was like, you don't have to wear a suit. You don't have to go in and talk to another guy and have a boss. You can be your own boss. So I said, hey, let's do it. Started out with my mom and dad. They had 2 gas stations that they had built over the 15 years that we had been in America at that time. My mom ran one. My dad ran one. They knew how to run a gas station, but really they were not as educated and understanding to know how to run a business. And that's where, with my college education, understanding, I doubled the size of the company overnight, and being able to go to a bank and actually obtain a loan. My dad had done all of this without getting a traditional bank loan. Because as a first-generation immigrant, his English wasn't the greatest. And, we live in the South. Most of the bankers are 55 and up white men who couldn't pronounce his name, And so there's no way they're giving him $1 million to go buy a gas station. Now this college kid comes in with a degree in finance, and I know how to talk to a commercial banker. So was able to, just by leveraging debt, grow the size of the company overnight, and at 21 years old, took out a $2.5 million loan. built this company over the next decade through the recession. And for us, we were living in Fayetteville, North Carolina at the time, and that was our home base. Fort Bragg is right there, which is the largest military base in the United States. Some people will say it's Fort Hood in Texas. I would like to say it's Fort Bragg, or as we call it now, Fort Liberty. And as many of you know, President Obama ended the war in Afghanistan, right? It was either Afghanistan or Iraq. I can't remember, one of the two, and brought a huge amount of troops home in '08. And then bin Laden is killed in 9 or 10, I believe. And we do a lot of drawdown from the Middle East. Well, where did all those troops come? But to Fort Bragg, and with a ton of hazard pay. So as the world, and the United States in specific, is reeling from the global financial crisis, my best years in business were 8, 9, 10, and 11, right? We're making money hand over fist because all of these troops are coming back. They're buying cars, they're buying homes, and they're settling down. They're getting married and spending money, right? From all of the hazard pay they've accumulated during the war. So we take a lot of that money, build out our jobbership, and then around 2013, 2014, I kind of see Elon and the first Teslas rolling off the line. And I'm like, oh my God, my gas stations are going to go out of business in 10 years. You know, I can't be in this business. I'm freaking out. I'm like 30 years old, just had a baby, and I'm working like 18 hours a day. And, you know, immigrant mentality is we don't hire. You just do it yourself. You just work harder, work longer. And I told my parents, you know, at the end of the day, this is still your company. Yes, I've built it to this. And you'll never hear the end of it from my immigrant mom. You know, she'll never tell you about any of your wins. You screw up that one time, she will hound you for the rest of your life. And so we sold off a large chunk of the company, our fuel jobbership, and a couple of the gas stations, paid off about 80% of my parents' debt. And I chose to start anew at the time with about 20 grand in my bank account and a home equity line, right? To move from Fayetteville an hour and a half north to the Research Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. We moved up here in 2015, and it's been a blessing ever since. Started in commercial real estate and commercial loan brokerage, because what I realized, there were thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of immigrants like my father who want access to capital, but don't know a banker who can speak their language, right? So every bank I've worked at as a commercial banker and as an SBA lender, I have been the only person of color at that bank, you know? And so I've made it a point to go back and help my community. And I've done this now for the past decade, right? And I've grown a whole network of clients, people, and a lot of people. This is built through trust. And the next evolution was for me to go back into entrepreneurship. And I fell into entrepreneurship really by accident. In 2018, we bought our first large single-family home. I'd owned condo before that, and we bought from a track builder, Pulte. And immediately after closing, I spent an additional $30,000 to $40,000 ripping out all the lighting, all of the things, adding in a ton of carpentry and framing and work into the home, because yes, I paid $500,000 for this home, but it was built like it would have been built in the 1990s. There was no change, no innovation. And at that time, a light bulb had gone off in my head that if they're charging these crazy prices, $500,000, and this is, pre-COVID pricing for a brand new home, and they're really giving you the cheapest quality product, you were like just shocked and amazed how much margin they must be making. And so in 2020, peak COVID, we sell a piece of property. I've got $1 million. I've got a 1031. Yes, I know, big problem to have, right? But typically what we would do is what we've done in the past, go buy an apartment complex, go buy a shopping center between a 7 and an 8 cap, lease it up, raise the rent, refi your initial equity out, right? It's the Burr method, but in commercial real estate. My buddy calls me and says, hey, I've got 6 acres, next slide down from your house. And we live in a very great area of Cary, right? And he's like, there's 6 acres there. The guy really wants to sell. He was trying to rezone it for a gas station. The town of Cary said, no, I think you can put 30 townhomes on it. Here's the pro forma. So me being a math guy, a finance guy, always go back to the Excel. For all of you that want to get into development, syndication, capital raising, fall in love with Excel. Excel is your best friend and financial modeling, right? We went back and I was like, oh, wow, I can make 3 to 4x more doing development. So why not do that? And here we are 5 years later. We currently have 7 projects in the pipeline, $250 million in construction, and we are on to our newest raise is about $22 million for this large mixed-use activity center, and about 1.5 miles from the Apple campus, and within a 1 to 3 mile radius, we have existing 16 million square feet of office and lab, and another 4 million under construction. You guys are probably thinking, wow, are they building office? Yes. When it comes to lab for biotech, for pharma, they are building that space out. And this is space where if you're working in a biotech company, you're coming to the office because you're running experiments, you're doing this, you're in a space. Our office occupancy here has gone up well over 60%, about 65%. I think nationwide, the average now is close to 70%. I think Americans have a short-term memory, and after this election cycle's over, no one's ever going to talk about COVID. We forget COVID. I think it's going to be a memory, and everyone's going to be required to come back to work. So the value herein lies on how close do you live with work. You want to shorten that commute. So that is the story, Matt. It was crazy. I mean, I kind of fell into it, really. And I really loved it so much because we do something different every day. I have a new challenge. It's not monotonous, If you really like to work, and my wife tells me you work too much, my kids tell me the same thing. I love to work. I really love it. I love it. I've always loved it. Probably because I saw my father work 100 hours a week. I never saw my father or mother growing up, right? We were raised by our grandmother because both my parents worked 80 to 100 hours a week, providing for us.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, no, especially even in the transition from, because my grandmother's from Macedonia, and when she originally came to this country, she came here by herself, left her 2 kids behind, both my aunt and uncle, got married, and had to leave them behind in order for them to come to the United States. And so she had this time to make friends, learn the language, get a job, And then I remember my Aunt Luba, I mean, I don't remember getting my Aunt Luba coming to the company, but I remember the story about my Aunt Luba coming to the country, and she didn't know a lick of English, was complete culture shock and that sort of thing. So just like hearing the stories around that evolution is just like, is absolutely just amazing. And the work ethic as well, because, one thing is that a lot of people complain in this country, we're kind of spoiled, right? And my grandmother, I remember the stories of my grandmother having to walk 2 miles to get fresh water and bring it back to her house in order to go cooking and stuff like that. I'm like, just think about the amount of opportunity that we have, and being so blessed to be here. So let's pull apart this. We were talking in the green room about this development deal, and it sounds like a complete nightmare. So of course I want to pull that apart and pull on all the threads of that. So you ran this thing through an Excel spreadsheet. You're like, dude, this thing is just going to print money. It's going to be easy. It's easy to understand and that sort of thing. And you found out in reality that was not the case. So kind of walk me through the evolution of that deal, like kind of like A through Z, and sort of the first signs of resistance you started to have.
So we believed, I'm an eternal optimist. And that's another thing. If you ever get into development and capital raising, you have to be an eternal optimist, because everyone is going to pepper you with questions about eternal doom and gloom. And it's your job as the sponsor, the GP of the fund, to make sure that you have an optimistic outlook, right? You shouldn't be in la la land and spit out lies or deceit, but you want to be optimistic based on the numbers and the trends, and try to be as positive as possible. But so we close on this land without zoning or entitlements, which usually is a no-no, and me being new to it had no clue. But we had a 1031, right? We got a great deal on the property because we were able to close in 60 days. And by doing so, we went through the rezoning process. Now, during this whole process, I hire, and for future reference, hire an attorney, right? We hired an ex-planning director who worked at the town of Cary for like 30 years, right? She was like 70, I think, when we hired her. But what happened was it was still COVID. I think in March of that time, we had just gotten the first amount of shots for those 65 and up, if I remember correctly, right? And so she wouldn't meet in person because she's that older lady. And I don't think she ever ended up meeting with any of the council members. And so the rezoning comes out, and the neighborhood beside us is a senior neighborhood, 55 and up community that Lennar had built literally like 3 or 4 years ago. And that there was about 5 neighbors in that whole community that were against this project. We found this out later on, but they came out against it, wrote letters to the council members. And at this time, none of the council members know who I am, right? And my liaison, this lady, let's call her Peggy, okay? Peggy is supposed to go and talk with the council members on my behalf. She never does this. The day before the vote, this is a year later, okay? So I've lost a whole year. Paid a year's worth of interest on the property because we have a land loan on the property. It's a low land loan, less than 50% LTV, but we have a loan on the property. And I get a call from the planning director, hey, you're not going to get the votes. You need to table this thing. And I'm like, okay, table it. Because if you don't have the votes, you have to wait like a year or 2 years to bring it back to council. So, I mean, it would have killed the deal. And we tabled the vote. Since then, I keep calling Peggy I'm like, Peggy, do you know what's going on? Doesn't answer her phone, you know? And so I realize I'm just going to have to do this myself, right? So I start calling around to the council members and all of that, and just like trying to schedule meetings, talking to them about the project and saying, hey, this would be great. And during all of this process, we've picked up the remaining an additional 6 acres. So now we have 12 acres. It's 60 townhomes. That's what we're pitching, right? So it's a big project now. It's like $30+ million project. I've never done anything in my life at this point, you know? Council members are receptive, and I talked to the mayor, and the mayor's been mayor here 30 years. Like, great mayor, Mayor Harold Weinberg, right? Super smart guy, very measured. He's like, you know what would help you is if you canvass the neighborhood and got the neighborhood to agree to vote for the rezoning, be comfortable with the rezoning. And I was like, wow, that's a great idea. Thank you, Mayor, and really appreciate your time. And so me, not knowing anything else, any of the logistics, I'm like, all right. I take me and my assistant, Elizabeth, and we're like, we're going to go knock on doors and talk about our rezoning. This was March 2022. We get the denial, right? Well, not the denial, where we have to table it. By this time, I've had all the meetings with the council members. We're in May. And May in North Carolina, days can be hot, okay? So we're out in the heat. It's like 80 degrees. I'm knocking on doors and talking to everybody. We end up realizing because in an old senior neighborhood, the HOA and all that, everybody talks about everybody because everybody's retired, okay? So they're like, oh my God, it's this lady, bleep out her name, and she's the one who's really against you, and she's trying to run to be HOA president, but we don't want her to be the president because she's real rude. And so if you're going to build this and we get this much more access, we'd love for you to build something like this. And to my extent, what I realize, and this is where people should do the homework, go walk the neighborhood, do the work. That's the only way you're going to figure it out, is you got to do the work. We got 54 signatures. And I stopped there. I called a couple of the council members. The council member from my district, her name was Ya Lu. She was the first Asian American woman elected in the state of North Carolina to a council. And we helped with that. And she ended up running for state house. And so that seat was open. I'll get into that here in a second. But we got it approved unanimously in July. We got it back on the docket, going from 0 votes, folks, to 7 votes, just by talking to people. That's it. And we told them the story. I told them, I'm not a publicly traded company. I'm not going to build shit product. I'm going to build an amazing product because I live in the community. All of these people are my neighbors, and I want to do what's right for Cary and the Research Triangle. And so we got it approved, and believe it or not, since then to today, we have gone through 7 rounds of site plan. I'm hoping August 15th, we get our 7th round back. We will have final site plan approval, and I can put shovels in the ground. But since then to today, we've lowered our unit count from 60. In zoning, we had to give concession of 5 units to 55 units. Then I had to get rid of underground retention because, as you know, COVID doubled the price of everything. So we went to an SCM pond, which is above ground retention. lost 5 units there to build an SEM pond. And then we had to lose 1 more unit for stormwater management on the northern side of the parcel. So I went from 60 to 49. So we're at 49 units. And what I tell people all of this time, what it does is my investors are still going to get the return that they were promised, because our market's a great market. People are still moving here. All it does is increase pricing. Because we have less units, I can spread out less of the risk. So we started in the 600s, high 500s, low 600s. We're in the 700s, right? And that's what it ends up doing when you lose units and you use time. I've ended up paying over $500,000 in interest carry just over 3 years on this project. And interest rates have gone up. So it's tight, but we've got our equity raised. We've got our debt. I close on my loan this month. We're hopefully shovels in the ground end of the month, early next month. And I mean, every mistake, like I said, I could make in this project, we have. And I think it's great to have made those and learn from them so we don't make them again. But it hasn't shied me away because we have 6 new projects in various stages of the pipeline.
So let's back up a little bit. The land financing. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people are not aware that you can get financing on land. So, you know, it sounds like it was a low loan to value, low loan to cost. Like, what did that look like? Did you land a home run with the first bank you talked to on this deal? Like, tell me about that.
So one of the things that's helpful for me is that I am a banker by trade. So I knew every commercial lender in town, but that was more on buying existing commercial real estate. I had not done a land loan. And so my buddy who actually showed me the property was a ex BB&T banker, 25 years, and had done a ton of this. And so he put me in touch with a bunch of banks. We landed on Town Bank. They're out of Northern Virginia. I think they're headquartered in Richmond. Great bank, about 25, 30 billion in assets. He said, until you have the zoning, this needs to be a 50% loan to value. Once you have zoning approved, they were willing to go up to 70%, 65, 70% loan to value. And at site plan, they would go as high as 80% loan to value. And so the entitlement process, it's extremely difficult here in Cary, very master plan community. Only one other municipality in the whole state is more difficult than Cary, and that would be Chapel Hill. Other municipalities up north in more rural areas, that zoning would have been done in 3 to 6 months, right? You should use that to your benefit. And what I tell people, a lot of people don't do this. This is my secret on finding the best dirt. Because people come to me and look at my projects and they're like, you've been doing this 4 years. How the hell did you find these amazing pieces of land when there's guys doing this for 30 years and they can't find these pieces of land? We have an extremely hyper-focused market that we want to be in. And our market for our fund is within a 15-mile radius of the Apple East Coast campus. Apple is a Mag 7 company, was the largest company in the world for about a decade, right? And it switches today now between Apple and Microsoft. When they come to a market, like they came to Austin in 2014, 2015, that turbocharged the growth for Tesla to come. Joe Rogan came after that. And I mean, the rest is history, right? And we believe with Apple coming here, that's the next catalyst, right? Google's cloud engineering hub is here in downtown Durham. They've rented out 2 buildings. They're full. They're going to be building a huge Google Tower potentially, or a campus. And if you look at their earnings report in Q2, behind YouTube and search, Google GCP is Google Cloud Platform, was their number 3 highest earning revenue in the company. And it's the fastest growing revenue because YouTube revenue dropped. Google Cloud Services revenue is up. And all of Google Cloud is here in North Carolina. It's not in Palo Alto, Cupertino, or Mountain View, right? In the Bay Area, it's here. So we believe we're poised for that growth.
So let's talk about, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but on the land financing, there's no income. All right, so there's no DSCR, no debt service coverage ratio, anything like that. How did they qualify you on this? Was that on a handshake, or did they look at global cash flow, your own personal income? Like, how did you actually qualify for this thing?
Exactly, that's correct. So they look at your own personal income, my father's income. We have our businesses that generate revenue, and that's how we were able to secure that loan on that DSCR. Our global cash flow allowed it, and we were able to get it at that lower LTV. But one of those specific things around that were personal guarantees, and we had corporate guarantees in our operating companies, where the operating companies had to guarantee the loan as well.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned in the green room that the capital raise on this deal was also a slog, and you learned a lot of things in the process. Like, what would you have done differently on the actual raise for this deal to maybe have taken less years off your life?
So I literally kind of on that first raise went the friends and family route and would just call everyone I knew. And what you realize is the people that know you the best are the ones least likely to invest in you, because they remember the 21-year-old version of you, right? The guy that was in the fraternity with you and those kind of things. And they can't comprehend that that was 20 years ago, right? And the first check I got was a guy I pitched and did not know him other than an introduction, and we were family friends, right? And what you realize is you also need to talk to people who have enough money to invest $100,000 where it's not life-changing if they were to lose it, right? My biggest investors who call me all the time, and trust me, I get calls all the time, because Apple announced about 3 months ago they were going to delay the construction of their campus by 24 months. And we know that they're still hiring, right? They have 600 employees here, and they are constantly hiring. They've got other buildings that are using, and I think they're just rethinking how many buildings they need in a hybrid work environment. They don't need 1.5 million square feet for 1,000 employees. Maybe they only need 800,000 square feet, right? And so that's all that they're doing. So I got calls from investors, and it's the same investors who invest $50K, and you realize going in those kind of tranches is extremely difficult. So towards the end of it, we tried to go to your higher net worth individuals and really kind of using the aspects of social media, like I'll tell you, I picked up an investor off my TikTok, right? When I tell people this, they're amazed. But there's a guy who saw my TikTok, DM'd me on TikTok, and then I said to our investor relations, Elizabeth, hey, this guy called me. Can you reach out, shoot him an email, and see if we can set up a Zoom? Set up the Zoom. I made the pitch, and he invested, And I was amazed. I was like, wow, this social media really works. But things like that, building the profile and really polishing your pitch. all of that you learn trial and error, and talking on this side to raise $4.25 million, which is what we raised. We ended up with about 28 LPs, right? Ranging from 50,000 to $250,000 to $500,000 is the highest person. And I'll tell you, the person who invested $500,000 never calls me. That person who invested $50,000 calls me all the time. And I mean, that's just the way it is, right? But my goal also is to give those people that are new Americans, first generation, second generation immigrant, who have worked their butts off their whole lives, like my parents, access to these amazing investment opportunities, right? Because they're not going to get access to this stuff. And 90% of them, like our parents age, just put the money in a checking account or a savings account or a CD, making like 3%, 4%. Right now, they may be getting 5-6%, right? We are paying an 8% pref. And then on top of that, we were at the time at a 19% IRR return on this. Today, we're closer to a 23 based on all our numbers, even with the delays, right? And so where else are these new Americans, is the term I like to use. I don't use the term immigrant because it's been heavily politicized. Once you come to America, you're an American, right? So you're just a newer American. There's immigrants or Americans that have come here in the last decade. They're just newer Americans than me because I came in the 80s, whereas you said your grandmother may have come in the 30s or the 20s, right? Same thing. So that was our whole thesis behind it and learning that. I think this next time around and all of these times since, we've gone the family office route, the real estate private equity route, ultra high net worth individual route, and using our circle and expanding that circle and really going to events and focusing on capital raising. And I don't like to say anything negative about other people, but there are a ton of people out there telling you that they know how to capital raise and they do this and that. Capital raising is as easy as you want to make it or as hard as you want to make it. But it all starts with the premise of you've got to have a solid product and idea, and you've got to be able to pitch it, right? And then you've got to get in those circles and those events and see who has the money. There's tons of money out there. I'm going to Dubai and then to India in the fall, in November and December. We may go out to Singapore, but that's our idea for our next $40 million fund that we're launching through New American Capital.
Excellent. So your story on capital raising is actually very divergent from the typical story we have on here, which is, we talk about people's first bigger deals all the time. Like friends and family is how I made it happen. Friends and family and professional contacts. Well, Garang, you must have been a very bad boy in your 20s, man.
Yeah, I mean, we helped start the first Asian American interest fraternity on the East Coast at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, back in 2003. There were none. We brought it from California over. And yeah, I mean, a large percentage of our first fund was friends and family. Like, don't get me wrong. More so my parents' contacts, right? They had a very well name in the community and that kind of thing. And that's a great thing about being in the South Asian community. I joke around is you'll never really meet a poor Indian person. And if you do, they've been living in America less than 5 years, right? We've kind of figured it out. And so a lot of those guys gave me that first shot. They were all my dad's friends, my mom's friends, my aunts and uncles' friends, and that kind of thing. But I didn't get like specifically close family. Out of all my aunts and uncles, we only have one of my uncles who invested, right? And then I have 2 cousins that invested. And we have like 18 cousins. Big, large, extended family. So I think they want to kind of see it. The second time around, they all were in the deal, you know? But now I think as you grow, you get those opportunities to talk to that higher echelon of investor.
So let's talk about when you started, like, I don't know. I mean, there's this whole mantra that I believe in, is that the best time to raise capital is when you don't need it. What's your talk tracks and scripts and methodology and process that you would prescribe for a residential investor right now that's like, scared out of their wits about, using other people's money? They bootstrapped it up to this point in time. Like, what can they start doing right now, today, this week, this month, in terms of like a plan for them to get positioned to raise capital in the future?
I think you have to start with the mantra of that you are a steward of other people's money, right? You want to make sure that if all hell breaks loose, that your investors are made whole before you. That is the mantra that you should go with from the beginning when you're raising capital, right? If all else fails, I need to make sure I get my investors' initial equity back, even if I lose all of my equity. And that's how you need to look at any of the projects you do. And once you ground yourself with that basis, you're able to go out and talk to them and discuss really what you think is a great idea or a development project, and you have to back it up with facts, right? We depend on a lot of research. We use CoStar, Crexi, a lot of other platforms. I talk to a lot of the commercial brokers. I also have my real estate license. And so I talk to the guys at JLL, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, and they have their quarterly market reports, annual market reports. You've got to take all of that data, provide that data, and use that data in your pitch. Like the Triangle is the fastest growing metro in the U.S. Here is the proof, right? We've beat Austin in terms of percentage of population growth over the last decade by like 0.5%. Raw numbers, Austin is significantly higher, right? And then you've got to have a very direct thesis. Our direct thesis is that we are going to invest in the tier 1 market of the Triangle. We're not going to go all the way out to Clayton or Garner or Johnson County, I tell people Garner is not sexy, and it's because the jobs are in Research Triangle Park, the high-paying jobs. And so not only do we look at household median income as an indicator of a zip code that we want to be in, we look at percentage of college graduates. If that zip code does not have over a 50% college graduate rate, even though it has a high household median income, we are not going to invest in that market. There are a ton of markets in Florida that are underwater right now, Southwest Florida specifically, south of Tampa, right? And then even in the central northern Orlando area, in the Space Coast area, that are underwater because high household median income, low college graduate rate. And what that is, it's retirees. Right? And we want to be in an area with robust growth of young people. I am not a Florida man. The markets I like in Florida are actually the Florida Silicon Valley, Lake Nona area, where Disney was originally going to spend $1 billion in creating all of their Pixar Studios, 3D, all of the stuff, AI, that they were going to be doing down there. And obviously, without getting too political, there's that whole issue between them and the Florida legislature and the governor, right? And so our governor has been pushing Disney to move up here. You've already got the talent. We have 3 amazing colleges within a 10-mile radius of each other. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, North Carolina State University, and Duke University, right? Amazing. I mean, the only 2 other parts of the U.S. that have 3 large public research and private research institutions in that space are the Bay Area and Boston, right? And those are the huge hubs. We have the highest concentration of PhDs outside of the Bay Area. We are number 3 in percentage of college graduates. The Bay Area is 1, Boston is 2, we are 3. So we know that the knowledge industry are jobs of the future. Even in a downturn, those jobs are going to be held, right? What are the jobs that first get cut? Manufacturing, blue collar, and then lower skilled, low labor, white collar jobs in hospitality and leisure, right? And where is hospitality and leisure? Florida. That's why Florida always has the highest highs and the lowest lows.
Well, I think we'll have to reserve the thesis of the silver tsunami and baby boomers for another show entirely, because I think it's the biggest potential housing crisis that we'll probably see in our lifetimes, but very concentrated into smaller geographic areas that we'll see in certain parts of the country. So, but Garang, you've been generous with your time, man. I really appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely need to do a part 2 in the future. But in closing out, where can our listeners and watchers get into your ecosystem at Gala Investments?
So our website is galainvestments.io. Reach out to us. We'd love to show you the projects that we're working on. We have $250 million in the pipeline, amazing projects in Research Triangle, hottest market in the U.S. My social media handles personally are at The Grand Gala, TheGrandGala, on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of the social medias. It's the same, YouTube as well. Our podcast is called the New American Media Podcast. Check it out, where I interview first and second generation immigrant entrepreneurs in all industries, from tech to healthcare to real estate to finance, and kind of talk to them how them being an immigrant really pushed them to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's a fantastic show. Definitely check it out. And if you guys are watching or listening to this right now and you want to get on exclusive content, educational long-form content that I drop it on my YouTube channel. So at Matt M. Drouin, definitely check it out and subscribe, and be sure to tune into our next installment of our industry expert series on YouTube that we're dropping next week. Garang, thank you so much for being on the show, man. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the green room.
Sounds good.